All right, we're here for another Spoon Editor podcast, and I'm excited to get talking about some of these topics. We have some great stories we've written this week and last week. But before we jump in, I want to go around the table and say hi to everyone. Catherine Lamb, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Chris Albrecht, how's it going over there? I think you're going on vacation soon to get out of this cloudy weather here.
Oh, yeah, it's miserable up in Seattle. Dark and rainy. I mean, it's Seattle.
You're getting rickets?
Yeah. As a friend of mine used to say, this is some real Rosie Larson weather, referencing the TV show The Killer, or Killing.
Oh, that was so depressing. I couldn't even watch it past like the first episode. Jen Marston, are you getting rainy weather where you're at?
Not really. The sun is out today and it is incredibly humid. So go climate change.
And did you change your name to Jenny? You wrote your name Jenny in the podcast. Platform.
We could do a reader survey about how people prefer my name, Jenny. So, call in with your votes, people.
Call in with your votes. We'll make the humanoid robot version of Jen Marston, Jenny. And I want to talk about humanoid robots because, Chris, the newsletter you wrote today asked the question, should robots in general take humanoid form? Because it seems like there's quite a few out there doing so. Tell us a little bit about that story.
So it's funny because it follows up on a story. Like if you look at the beginning of the month, you had in like quick succession, there was Cafe X shuttering 3 of its locations, Zoom Pizza, which used robots for helping make pizza, shuttering its pizza delivery, its own branded pizza delivery business. And then you had reports of like Creator, the hamburger joint, losing funding because of SoftBank's debacle with its own WeWork stuff, right? So it looked really grim at the beginning. And I was wondering if we should even use the term food robots anymore because robots have such baggage associated with them, right? Like it's, you think of the Terminator or you think of Rosie the robot, right? You think of a bipedal humanoid looking figure. And that's just not what they are. They are, they are arms in the case of Cafe X, or they're more like embedded automation, like what Brigo does, right? Like Brigo serves you a latte, but all the automation is behind a wall and you can't see it. And it spits out a cup of coffee to you. But lo and behold, in the past week, I've written about not one, but 2 different companies, 2 different startups that are like, no, man, we want to build humanoid-looking robots. They build drink dispensing robots. That's what they do right now. Mako Robotics in Spain and RoboJuice in San Francisco. And they're sticking with the arms, man. They've got a humanoid with a head and 2 arms, and the Mako Robotics pours beer. And the RoboJuice will do what it says, which is a robot making juice. And it's just interesting because you wonder, what do we want from our automation? Do we want convenience? Is robotic arms the fastest way to get you something? Or is it just entertaining, right? That's part of RoboJuice's pitch is like, well, yeah, there are vending machines out there like Albert's, but, we've got this robot and it's got an entertainment value. And so I'm just curious as to what do we want from humanoid robots? I mean, I'm curious to hear what you guys think. I guess it's sort of situation dependent, but ultimately it just seems like so much fluff. But I don't know. Maybe you guys would be like, oh no, I totally want a robot arm. I want a little flair with my drink in the morning.
I like the robot arm. This is Catherine. I think it's cool. And I understand your point, Chris, that I think maybe down the road, once this becomes a little bit more normalized, we're seeing more automation. I'm like, okay, enough with the show. Just give me my latte ASAP. I'm too grumpy for this. I want it quickly. But for now, it's like, I think that could be a big draw. I think it's fun. When I tell friends that our company reports on robots in restaurants, they're like, oh, like cafe, they like that sort of flair. I think it draws people in.
It's early in the robot kind of food rollout, and so there's still a novelty to humanoid-looking robots. Mm-hmm. I think that's why when you saw Cafe X with crowds around it, people still thought it was cool. I have to say, RoboJuice definitely looks like something like you'd see in like a 1990s movie that had a food robot about the future. Had like little eyes. So RoboJuice. So I just wonder how well that ages over time if they start to become, as robotics just becomes a bigger part of our everyday lives, if these humanoid robots start to kind of appear, kind of almost seem like a thing from the past, or a little bit kind of like they don't age well, I guess. So I definitely think for now, like the humanoid form factor makes sense in entertainment oriented kind of venues, whether that's at a fair, even like in a public space like an airport or like at a stadium. I think it makes sense. But I was thinking a little bit when I read your piece, Chris, about the bread bot. Now, that's a very kind of like that's something that just sits in the public area of like a grocery store, but it's not a humanoid form, but it's still very cool. Like it's like this. And I felt like Creator is a little bit similar. Like Creator is actually a cool thing to watch. It's robotics. It assembles a burger, but it doesn't take on the humanoid form. Like I kind of feel like that's the direction you're going to see these go eventually.
I found myself wondering about context because it reminded me, Chris, which was the company they had robots in grocery stores with the googly eyes that were scaring people?
Oh, that was Badger. With their floor bot that would identify spills and stuff on the ground.
Right, because it seems to me that if you have something like RoboJuice where it's a little bit more, it's almost, it's on display. It's not going to move anywhere. It's not going to sneak up behind you. Then I can see the entertainment value, but a giant robot with big eyes sort of coming up behind you while you're in the cereal aisle right now, at least, I can see where that would be off-putting to somebody who's just trying to run in and grab a few groceries after work.
Well, I think also as it pertains to sort of this discussion, what is it investors want, right? Like what's the best way to scale? Is scaling, I mean, these robotic arms aren't cheap. Mm-hmm. And, can they pump through the volume? Do they have the throughput necessary, the Cafe X is now in 2 airport locations in San Jose and San Francisco. And they're going for like vending machine status, so they don't have to have a human around. But I think it's just curious. And to your point, Jen, actually, what's kind of funny is Mako is like, hey, man, we're just putting this robot in a cage right now so that we can train it how to use it. We want an independent, fully moving humanoid robot in the kitchen to help with people. So their goal actually is, it's not necessarily going to sneak up on you in the aisle, but they want like a humanoid robot, like you would see in a movie, like an android walking around helping you make meals.
Do you guys remember the Super Bowl ad like 5 years ago with the quirky robot that was like ogling the lady vacuuming? You guys remember that? Chris, remember that?
I don't actually.
It was Quirky, the company that was basically a home automation company, and they put out an ad with a robot that was just kind of like it was vacuuming. It was a vacuuming. It was watching the lady working out. It was super kind of creepy, but it was kind of also funny. I think these are fun to watch. I tend to think like from an investor perspective, to your point, Chris, like it's the robots that are going to make money, and I think that's why they are more interested in these kind of back of house, high volume robotics that aren't as like more of a show, but actually help reduce costs in businesses like restaurants. I think that's where investors are looking at right now in terms of robotics.
Yeah, you look at something like a Picnic, right, which just came out, which just raised $5 million. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they have a modular assembly robot, and it's not meant to put on a show. It's meant really to just chug through and make 300 pizzas an hour or assemble 300 sandwiches in an hour or whatever, right? Like it is literally just plopping food on things.
And it did at CES. Catherine, it was actually producing it at a really high rate at CES.
Yeah, right? I saw it at CES, but also to that point, there were crowds and crowds of people looking at it at CES. I mean, yes, they were buying pizza from it, but also, at least for now, it does have that novelty factor. Even something that isn't really humanoid with articulating arms, people are still interested in seeing something like that. So, but I see your point. It will be in back of house, so it's just like volume. And it was functioning at CES, feeding hundreds and thousands of people. So,
well I guess I wonder is as the general public gets more used to this idea, where a robot making pizzas at CES is less of an anomaly if the wow factor just wears off. Like how long term is the entertainment value of sort of those more flashy robots?
Totally. And Chris has made the point before that it's like, what do we call them? Because to call Picnic a robot, I mean, I technically, I guess it is, but it's essentially just a conveyor belt where like cheese and pepperoni and sauce are dispensed and dropped on top. If you called it a conveyor belt or like a extended pizza vending machine, I don't think as many people would maybe try to be pressing to go and see it. So it's like partially branding. What are we expecting with robotics? And like as you say, what do we want? Do we want just the results as quickly as possible, or do we want a show?
Yeah, man. But if it hangs on a wall, is it art?
Oh my God, I don't know. This is a philosophy podcast now.
He went there. He went there.
All right. With that, I'm going to change the subject before we get too philosophical for our listeners. We're going to talk about the Miele. I always mispronounce it, by the way. I had one of our listeners tweet at us saying it's not Miele, it's Miele.
Miele.
Miele, the German high-end cooking appliance company, was the first company to introduce a oven that used this really forward advanced cooking technology called solid state cooking, basically using a lot of the same tech that's in your cell phone to cook. And they introduced this concept in 2017 at this trade show in Germany called IFA. A year later, they introduced a meal service. They would accompany it. And since then, I've been trying to follow if they ever sent it into the marketplace. And lo and behold, I was emailing with them this week, and they actually have delivered it to 20 countries. So I wrote an article this morning about it. Just real quickly, for those of you who don't know about this type of technology, it's think about like the microwave, but like a modern version of it. And what's cool about this technology is like you could put like 5 different things in the cooking chamber, like meat and then proteins and then vegetables, and it could cook each one of them at their own different speed and heat using very focused directional technology. Now, I think this technology is going to be a big deal. Like in 10 years from now, I think it could displace the microwave. So I just thought that was kind of a cool story. Chris, do you want one of these in your house, by the way?
Not for 7,900 euros.
Yeah, that's a little thing. It's 8,000 euros. Well, let me ask you guys, I use a microwave a lot. Like it's the thing I use more than probably any other appliance in my kitchen. I know, Chris, you have a June, which you may displace your microwave, but like, do you guys use your microwave a lot, and would you like replace it if you had a much better version of it?
I don't know. I guess I'm maybe not grasping exactly what is so much better about this technology, because right now, like I do perfectly fine having a microwave, a toaster, and an oven. Like, and maybe I admittedly am like kind of a cooking nerd. I like doing a lot of this stuff and like the long way, the slow way. I enjoy that. So maybe there is just a market where people who want it quicker, but like what is so much better about it that makes it worth the price?
Well, imagine replacing those 3 devices you just talked about with one, and also, I guess, doing it better. And I'm not trying to like be a salesperson for this product, like, but I'm interested, and I think the technology has lots of potential. So, just the simple idea of like it identifies what type of food is what, and then can cook it at a specific thing. So if you said cook meat at this temperature, 250 degrees, cook the protein, or cook the vegetables at this temperature, it can do that all within the same cooking chamber. Like just you put your plate in there and it just cooks the plate.
Oh, that is cool. And it's an interesting point that like you mentioned the June, and then there's also like Innova, which I guess was acquired by Electrolux, but seeing a big appliance, more like established appliance company investing in this sort of technology is also interesting.
I think part of the problem is just what you said though. Like you don't quite get the difference, right? I mean, I think as consumers, we all just have like what we're used to in terms of like cooking boxes in our kitchen. Like, hey, a microwave does this, an oven does this. And like part of the problem for Miele and like other folks putting this out in the market is like, how do you explain it to consumers? Like, cause it's not super easy to grasp. It's cool cause I've been following it and you know, I dig this stuff, but like for the average consumer, I think this may be a problem.
Well, isn't that sort of like what's happening with induction, right? Like induction's been around, it's popular in Europe, but you know, a lot of people here don't even know about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's superior technology. Like Europeans love it. It's more cost efficient, but like part of the problem is like US people just love cooking with fire. Like it just looks cooler. We just like no, seriously, like it looks like having like gas ranges in our kitchen. We just fallen in love with that.
Please say that with a Beavis voice next time.
Yeah, fire. So, yeah, but I think that maybe ultimately we'll see more induction in the kitchen, but that's a good point, Chris.
Yeah. And well, what I was also curious about, Mike, with your story is the meals that go along with it, right? Because in addition, it's the M Chef meals.
Yeah, it's a weird, like almost side note that they introduced this meal delivery service, and they started a separate company for it, and they've even like created patented packaging. Like they'll deliver it in like this kind of porcelain dishes and special packaging, like only in the way like a high-end German appliance company would. Like you'd never see this from like a kind of a lower end like appliance company in the U.S.
You will use the crock and you would put it in there, and then
exactly, like it was
cook
just
it, and
a
then you would
very
put it back, and then we would pick it
very premium meal approach. Like they actually have and they have up to 20 different plates and meals and like delivered to you, and they cook it in this thing. And I'm not sure necessarily that they needed to create a meal delivery service, but I think it's an interesting attempt to do something different.
Well, I wonder if that's part of the education thing, right? Like, here's a really easy way for you to figure out how to use this, and we'll provide you sort of the template. Here's a piece of salmon, a bunch of broccoli, and some rice, right? Stick them all into the oven at the same time. Bada boom, bada bing. It cooks it all properly.
Yeah, it's a scan and cook almost. Like, hey, this is meal number 5.
Yeah.
And it cooks it perfectly all on one plate.
Right. And then maybe you might learn, oh, okay, now I kind of get the gist of it. But what I was curious about, it looks like that's also, they're using, it's not disposable packaging. It sounds like you return the crock pottery or whatever it is, the special containers, and they pick it up and bring it back for reuse.
Yeah, that's what it looks like, which again, that's definitely not something I think you'd see in the U.S. We throw everything away here, or at least we put it in the recycle bin. I appreciate the idea, right? I think like reusing packaging makes a lot of sense. But yeah, that's another interesting wrinkle on this delivery service. Speaking of delivery, though, I want to get to this next story. Chris, you had a story about the idea of grocery stores getting into delivering prepared meals. So when you go into a grocery store, you go to the hot food aisle and there's a person behind the glass counter scoops up like kung pao chicken or the rice dish or whatever, a nice salad. Like I love that food. Like at my local PCC market, like that's some of the best food in there. But like I never really had it delivered to my home. You think this could be a big deal in the future? Yeah.
To be fair, Jen wrote the initial story last week. It was kicked off with Instacart announcing it was going to deliver this sort of made-to-order food, like at the deli counter. But if you kind of broaden that out a little bit, yeah, I think this is because one of the things that often happens in our house is it'll be 4:00. My wife and I have both been running around to meetings or on calls all day. And, our son's going to be home from whatever after school activity. And, we need to eat some for dinner. Hey, on your way home from picking him up, can you pick up a rotisserie chicken? Right. It's like, it's $8 and it's delicious. It's cooked perfectly. I can also grab some sides, or if I need milk or whatever, right? Like I can just wrap it into a bigger thing. And I think that, especially like you said, Mike, like the to-go, the hot bar items at my local grocery store are delicious.
That's the best stuff.
They're really good. Like the mac and cheese and the Brussels sprouts and the chicken tenders or whatever, like it's all really good. And if you could wrap that in, like if you think about delivery happening, Amazon Prime members get 2-hour delivery through Whole Foods, or Walmart with its delivery unlimited service, right? Like if you just go, okay, I need a couple things, but I don't really have time to make dinner tonight. Ooh, I love the, I love the potato salad that's from Walmart, or, I love I can order a chicken or a flatbread pizza, and it can come, I can, while I'm doing that, I can also get the milk I need, or if I wanted some dessert. Like this just seems like a no-brainer and a really smart idea. I think it'll help, grocery stores have another avenue of sort of revenue. And, it's like, there is sort of this blurring between grocery store and restaurant anymore with all of if you think about walking into a Whole Foods or a PCC, just like, whoa, there's a pizzeria and there's a bakery and there's a, coffee shop and there's a, they're serving, cuts of meat and all this stuff. If you just have the ability to have that delivered, just seems like it'll be a game changer to me.
I think one of the things that was also brought up when Instacart released that initial news was that it potentially could be a cheaper meal delivery option for customers. So if you're ordering your groceries via Instacart from Publix, which is who they did the initial deal with, and you say, okay, well, I'm really hungry right now, so I'm going to go ahead and build my own sandwich at the digital deli. From like a Publix, the cost of that sandwich for the consumer is probably going to be a lot cheaper than if you made a completely separate delivery order from whatever, fill in the blank Subway or something. So that is also, I think, part of the appeal of this as well.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, you are absolutely correct.
I mean, it's to to your point, Chris, like there's the blurring of the lines between where you're getting your food. I think 10 years ago, most grocery store executives would not say they're competing with Pizza Hut. And I mean, maybe it's to a certain degree, like if you look at the overall food spend, but like now, and it's certainly more so in the future, these guys are all competing. Like if we're ordering through apps and we're having hot food delivered to us, like it's up against like the local Pizza Hut versus, PF Chang's versus like Whole Foods, because like they all have kitchens, they're all making nice hot food, and we're all eating. So I think this competition and this future where all these different guys are trying to compete for our dinner dollars is going to be really interesting.
Yeah, and if you just think about it, like it gives, it is cheaper, as Jen points out, right? Like I can get a whole chicken to feed my whole family and have leftovers for like $8 to $12 or whatever, right? Like that's so much cheaper than that's like the price of a single entree from a restaurant. And if I can fill in like the gaps around what I also need in my pantry, that's just, that seems like that's, that's just, sign me up. Sign me up.
Yeah, I mean, I think just with restaurant delivery in general, people, myself included, are starting to get tired of delivery fee after delivery fee after delivery fee. So I think the more ways you can, lump that into one transaction that is going to be lower than having to, here's my groceries in this pile and my lunch in this area and my dinner here. I think people are going to really respond to that positively.
Mm-hmm. It also seems like you can get more mileage out of things. Like you mentioned the rotisserie chicken, you eat that just as is one night. Maybe the next day you like make a sandwich out of it for lunch or something, as opposed to getting like a Thai curry delivery. Like I'm going to eat it and like, yeah, maybe I'll have some leftover for the next day, but it's so much easier to just like one and done it and then order something else the next day. There's a little more versatility. It's like, it's a sort of a halfway between a full on meal delivery and the grocery, as you were saying. So
one thing I haven't seen anyone delivering yet to eat are bugs. And so that brings us to our next story, Catherine. You wrote about in the newsletter last week. Should we stop bugging people to eat bugs? I think the hook for that story was a thinker or writer, a guy by the name of Mike Bird, who basically is pointing to The Economist's continuous coverage of bugs as food and basically saying, stop doing this, Economist. So tell us about this.
Yeah, so it was actually Chris that sent the tweet to me, and it really, I've been a long time bug eating advocate, and it just makes so much sense on paper, where you're like, okay, the majority of the planet does eat insects. It's really like healthy for you. There's a lot of protein and vitamins. It doesn't require very much land or water usage. So it's like good for you, good for the environment, but people just don't want to eat them in Western cultures, specifically speaking to the US. And I get it. Like I'm someone who like talks a big talk about eating insects, but how often do I ever buy like grasshopper snacks? Essentially never. And like if I'm out and about, I'll try a bite or two, but am I going to incorporate them into my like everyday eating scenario? Not really, because they're kind of gross to me. Like there's this mental barrier we have to get over. So his argument, and which Mike Bird, which I kind of get, is just stop trying to make people eat them in the US. Like instead, maybe I thought you can invest more energy in like promoting plant-based food or cultured, or I think if people do want to get people to eat insects, they've got to make them in a totally unrecognizable state. Like people don't want to see antenna when they're eating a snack. It's kind of gross, but like blend it up into a protein powder.
I think that's exactly it, right? I think the issue is like, and what he was referring to when he talked about it, he had a picture of like a big bowl of like scary looking bugs, like caterpillars or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I think there's very few Americans today that want to just like snack on those versus chips. But like, there's no doubt, like if you just ground it down to powder and baked like a muffin with it, like there's a lot more people that would. So I think the thing is we need to get to this market where you just transition all the bug protein into like stuff that's an ingredient. It's like a cheaper ingredient. Like when I go to Costco today, I see coconut flour and all these different like alternative flours, almond flour. Like why can't I just go to Costco and see cricket flour?
Right. And I think, I don't know, you have to build up the recognition too, because like not many people might go ahead and buy cricket flour, maybe a few, but if you build up brand loyalty around like XO is a protein bar that has cricket powder, people like it. If we get more brands like that where people sort of can taste that it is good, and then eventually are like, oh, maybe I could use this as like a high protein supplement in my morning smoothie or whatever. That could be interesting.
Chris, would you eat something with cricket powder?
Cricket powder, yes.
Flour?
Cricket flour, yes. Cricket powder. I mean, again, depending on what it did. Like if it's really gritty, if it doesn't dissolve well and it's really gritty, and then no. But if it's it's packed with protein, yeah, sure, I can. Yeah, sure, why not? But I like honestly. I think the picture they showed was it's like a bowl full of caterpillars, and they were "Oh, this is a perfect protein, and it has all these other things in it."
They're not doing a good job of marketing it. But listen, I think that it's cultural partly, but also like we eat seafood. I think like shellfish are basically bugs of the sea.
Totally.
It's like we eat French eat like snails. It's just like partly once you start doing it, get used to it. Like it's not a big deal, but I just think we're not used to it.
Right. And I think we might need time. Like your seafood point's really accurate. Like people used to feed lobsters to like prisoners or whatever because they thought they were creepy and gross. Now it's a super prized food. So I could see that happening with cricket. And especially, Chris, as you were saying, protein powder, I think that could be the really interesting entry point to market for all these insect companies, is that they're really high in protein and vitamins and low in fat. So they should really be branding themselves as like health supplements almost, instead of like, it's good for the planet, because it's sort of like plant-based meats. Like, yeah, it's good for the planet. That's only going to get so many people to do it. If you want it to be a large scale, like figure out some other sales angle. Like it tastes really good. It's healthier for you. It's cheaper, stuff like that.
Jen, let me get your thoughts. Would you eat a handful of like tasted with bugs with eyes, or would you prefer it in like in a powder form?
So, I mean, I would prefer it in a powder form. I would try a handful of bugs with eyes and antenna. But I was going to say, I think all of us on this call would, but we also live in a bubble where this is what we talk about all day, every day. And I think most people would not. I think it's a incredibly tall order to think that, I mean, we live in a culture where we pay exterminators to come to the house and spray chemicals so that bugs don't come in the house. I think just that's an example of just the general mindset and we have around bugs. And I'm not criticizing that. I'm just saying, thinking about that and then setting a plate of crickets in front of somebody, like that's a really big jump that I don't think we're going to be able to make with a lot of Western consumers, at least not anytime soon. I do think that maybe powders and, like cricket flour baked into cookies or something could be an entry point. But again, I mean, I still think most people, your average consumer is going to kind of maybe balk a little bit at the idea of seeing the word cricket on the bag of flour they buy from Publix.
Whether or not people buy it or not, well, this is something maybe we could talk about in the future. I don't think we'll be talking about it too much next month at our Customized conference. But before we close and say goodbye, I just do want to mention that I'm getting super excited about our conference next month in New York City, February 27th, called Customized. It's all about food personalization. Catherine, you're going to be there?
Oh, yeah.
Jen, I think you're going to be there. You're going to be flying in from Spain, it sounds like, and maybe moderating a panel and writing a little bit.
Yes, I will.
And we have some great speakers from the likes of Kroger and from the likes of Kraft Heinz. And also we just added a speaker from Nestle talking about like what they're doing in terms of personalization. So, and not to mention just a ton of startups. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited about it. If you're listening and want to go, you can buy a ticket, use the discount code podcast for 15% off. Just go to thespoon.tech and look for the events page, and you can find how to get to more information about Customized there.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. Everyone should come. It's in New York. We work food labs, and you can try some 3D printed vitamins.
I forgot about that.
Hey, in addition to the companies, can you guys tell us just what some of the topics are going to be? Just because this is like a whole new area for people.
Yeah, I mean, it's like no matter where you look in the world of food, everyone's talking about personalization. And so whether that's in restaurants or like at grocery stores or at our kitchen tables, this idea of like tailoring meals and what we're eating towards like my personal preferences or my health biomarkers, that is just a big topic of conversation. We're going to be dissecting all of it. And what I find fascinating is we're going to have some big food brands like Nestle coming and talk about how they've been on like a multi-year journey to adapt their business and figure out a way to kind of personalize products that have largely been like high, kind of like mass production to kind of more mass personalization. Just really going to be like a lot of different areas we're talking about because like it's such a big topic.
Look forward to seeing all the coverage coming out of there.
Yes, and you're staying home because we need someone to actually write some stories during those days. So.
Yeah, I will be on home duty, watching from afar and cheering you guys on. It sounds like an awesome event.
It will be. So I'm looking forward to it. I hope to see some of our listeners there. But aside from that, thanks for getting together and talking about things like eating bugs, guys.
A pleasure.
And that's, by the way, what you're all getting for your next like Christmas gift. I'm going to buy like bug-based proteins.
I'm down.
Snacks. You're down with
Bring
it?
it on.
Bug
Yeah.
snacks.
Just send over a bucket full of grubs.
How about a bug bake-off competition?
Ooh, that's a great idea.
Great British Baking Show.
The Great
episode
British Bug Off.
I'd watch that.
Doesn't that mean something in British?
Yes. As soon as I said that, I realized that might have different connotations.
We
I
lost
don't
all our
know.
British listeners.
Might want to edit that out.
All right, guys. Thanks for getting together today. Have a good time.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.